we're live actually. All right, so we're live. All right, so Kevin, I think we went live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So first of all, I want to say hello to everyone who will be watching us today in this another live podcast, and another great experienced person from the world of project management. I'm welcoming here today with me Kevin Dorbelnet. Is that correct? Your surname
That's
Dorbelnet, right?
that's right. Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Ahmed. Pleasure to be with you. Really looking forward to our
Welcome.
discussion.
Welcome. Today we picked, I think, one of those trending topics lately on PMI's agenda, enterprise agility. I know that you were one of the people who contributed to the early research phase, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin. Okay,
Yep.
which then was an important input for the manifesto itself to be written then by the. So first of all, I'm going to start with you. It's really a good opportunity for you to touch base with the audience, to introduce yourself, your background, what you did so far, and how did you get to join PMI on that research phase, and your relationship with agile in general, and then we'll talk about the specific topics later on.
Sure. And look, thanks again for having me. It's great to be with you. And look, the enterprise agility is definitely a topic very close to my heart. But a little bit about my background. I've really spent the entirety of my 20-year career now in food and beverage manufacturing, or probably more broadly, consumer packaged goods. The bulk of that was actually at Nestle, and over the years had responsibilities over engineering capex projects. This was in an environment where we were building, some years 1 to 2 factories every year, and was part of a high performance PMO and capex engineering COE. Later in my career, actually, as our business was going through a big transformation, and like many companies are contending with here, leveraging some of these big consultancies here to support that transformation program. I had the opportunity to support the execution of the top line growth ambition, through innovation. So in other words, at that point, was standing up an innovation PMO and work closely with the marketing and sales organization to drive the execution of this really ambitious top line growth opportunity. So ultimately, a combination of transformation and innovation, and I would definitely proclaim myself to be an entrepreneur, always, looking towards the future, and identifying, how do we get better, how do we grow, and I particularly appreciate, the challenge of going fast with innovation, particularly in large, complex organizations that tend to be bureaucratic and risk averse. Is a challenge that I know many companies face, and I experienced, myself. Ultimately, I also then had the opportunity, as our business unit was sold to private equity, to stay on and experience that carve out. And at that point, was tapped to stand up R&D within the business as we were separating from Nestle. So my project management experience is very much a learned, practical experience, on the front line of execution, but also, the blessing of being able to build project management teams and programs, right, as a key enabler of strategy, execution, innovation, and transformation. I think actually in terms of my PMI experience, this was a much later in my career where I actually got my PMP certification. So I appreciated the opportunity to have a lot of this learned experience, and then going through the curriculum and the knowledge and the resources that PMI brings forward, and then really kind of look at that through the lens of the practical experience that I had, and really recognize, okay, here's some things that are really robust and strong that I should add into how I manage projects, but then also look at the practical realities of what it looks like on the front line. So anyways, I think out of all of this project experience across innovation and innovation was born this passion for enterprise agility, as I alluded to. And frankly, in terms of my involvement on this subject, it probably really started last year, because PMI released a report, March of 2025, I think it was, a new era for enterprise agility. And when this report was published, I was frankly a bit disappointed in what it was focused on. It was a 37-page report looking at the construct of, how many agile project versus traditional waterfall projects, different industries are tackling. And so the focus was really largely around project methodologies. And from my experience, when executives talk about enterprise agility, that's really not the lens that they, put it through. And so I was pretty outspoken actually in terms of my frustration or disappointment in terms of, where the conversation was focused on. And through those interactions and collaboration with an open, PMI leadership and having the opportunity to connect with folks like Lenka and have some of these conversations, I then got invited to contribute into the research that advanced, the more recent Enterprise Agility Manifesto. And I'm grateful, for being part of that conversation, but also being acknowledged in the credits there. But I do see the conversation has evolved significantly, very much aligned with my view of the world when we talk about enterprise agility from last year to this year. So,
given since you're an entrepreneur, was it like a mandatory or a prerequisite to be an entrepreneur in order to participate in that research phase or preparation phase for the manifesto?
No, I think, PMI did a really good job of reaching out to executive leaderships. I think, bringing insight and input from CEOs and senior leaders, as well as industry experts, and, certainly within the project management community, the practitioner community. So I think it was a really well-rounded, outreach, bringing perspectives from really all different facets of this topic here from different parts of business, really.
Right.
So
right.
Again, I was grateful to contribute from my industry experience, and as certainly now an entrepreneur, but a lot of my corporate background as well.
Right. So the manifesto for the enterprise agility was released a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, a bit longer than a few weeks ago.
Yeah, March.
Yeah, a few weeks ago exactly. It's based on 4 values, okay, 9 principles, okay. One of the values says clear purpose realized. Let me read it here. Clear purpose realized through adaptive plans. In your opinion, how can organizations keep a stable purpose while changing plans frequently? Actually, and that's the pure sense of agility. Actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And look, purpose is so critical here, but I think for me, this comes down to separating purpose from plans, right? Purpose should be stable, plans should not. And so at the enterprise level, purpose is ultimately your North Star, right? That's the target that we're shooting for. And it's what allows you to adapt without losing directions, particularly when conditions change. So that you're not debating everything from scratch, right? When you're confronted with change, you're asking a much simpler question of, are we still advancing the purpose of the organization? I think where most organizations really struggle with purpose is at the project level. And I'm a big fan of Antonio Neto Rodriguez and his thought leadership work and the idea of the project economy, but also his view in terms of defining purpose at a project level. Because I think we're really good, especially as the project management community, at defining scope, timeline, and budget. But honestly, we're terrible at defining why this project exists in the first place. If that why isn't clear and meaningful and inspiring, teams just end up defaulting back to the plan, even when the plan no longer makes sense. So for me, enterprise agility really starts with a clear enterprise purpose, and then focus on articulating a project purpose that ensures that the project is connected with that enterprise purpose, and then really giving the teams the ability to adapt the plan in service of that purpose. So, because if you get that right, changing plans at that point isn't you're really creating chaos. It's really more reinforcing clarity and enabling alignment.
You said purpose should be fixed, plans should be adaptive.
Exactly.
What if purpose also needs to change, needs to adapt as well? It can happen.
Yeah, it certainly can. And I do think, again, look, leadership and governance, plays the role of supporting an evolution in purpose. But at the end of the day, I don't think purpose should be that volatile when you talk about it at the enterprise level. The who we are or why we are what we're trying to be tends to be more fixed. And again, it's, the conditions around how to bring that to life in reality through the plans and projects that are in support of that mission, that should adapt, as the business environment evolves. So again, I think the change volatility, right, of the plan is much higher than the purpose, let's say.
Hmm. The first Agile Manifesto was released in 2001, and I know you know that, and I probably know that you're one of those people who really try to keep up with the manifesto, apply, or be agile as much as possible in projects and initiatives. For the past 25 years, we've been living with a manifesto which was mostly coming from the software industry. But now I know the enterprise agility is not focusing on a particular industry. It's actually probably covering more industries. It's more broad, or it's broader actually. It's broader. Before I jump to my next question, I have this little question probably I could ask you. For the past 25 years, we've been talking a lot about agility. It's been integrated in a lot of certifications. A lot of companies, I think most companies now would like to be more agile in their projects. Some succeeded, some not. Okay, some still trying. What's your perception on this? Did really companies manage to adapt agility in their projects and their mindset and in the way they do work? Or are the vast majority are still struggling? And if yes, they're still struggling, why do you think they are?
Yeah, well, look, I think this is where I look at it probably quite differently than that. And I guess first off, right, just going back to my background and experience here, right, I worked in a physical good industry, building factories, developing new products that you'll see on the shelf in your grocery store. So they're physical things, right? And so definitely have a great appreciation for agile methodologies, project methodologies, and how they fit and suit software projects, right, where the implication of change and redesign is more manageable, right? Where you're dealing with software as opposed to physical things, right? So in other words, at some point, I'm constrained building a factory and developing a new product when I start, pouring foundations or cutting metal, where a change in design is really hard to absorb. I think for me, I think most projects, when we get out of this, agile purist versus waterfall purist here, should be, hybrids where you're bringing in agility where it makes sense. In the context of the types of projects that I work in, it's very much in the upfront, prototyping and kind of preliminary due diligence type of work that you'll do across those type of project. But then you get to a point where you have to kind of transition to more sequential or waterfall, based approach. But I do think, part of the conversation, the opportunity, especially within the project community here, is making sure that when we talk about enterprise agility, we are not talking about a project methodology debate, agile versus waterfall. We are talking, for me, what it really boils down is a portfolio management agility, right? Are we working on the right things? Not are we doing enough agile versus waterfall projects? And that's the objection that I had, frankly, in the report from last year, and where, again, when you look at this enterprise agility manifesto, it's more elevated to how senior leaders and executives think of enterprise agility, which is, are we working on the right things, and are we able to adapt quickly enough, right, when a project that sounded good at the beginning of the year starts evolving through its kind of natural learning journey to get to a point of realizing this project doesn't make sense anymore. I need to kill it, and I need to move on to these other projects that are, more relevant. So again, in the language of the project management world, we're talking about project portfolio agility, not, agile versus waterfall projects.
Right. So it's more on a strategic level,
Exactly.
on top of the company. And I definitely think that PMI has got its own way and plans on how to spread the word about the enterprise agility. You said earlier that we've been talking about agility, officially for the past 25 years, and still many companies are struggling, to adapt agility to their projects. How long do you think it could take companies and enterprises in general to adopt the enterprise agility mindset, which is described in the manifesto released a couple of months ago? And how far could that go, in your opinion? Because you're an entrepreneur, you deal a lot with clients from different industries, even though you focus a lot on the FMCG, if I'm not wrong, industry.
Yeah,
That's the fast moving.
fast moving consumer
Yeah.
goods. That's right. Yeah. Look, I mean,
Exactly.
again, I think we got to get past this muddled definition of enterprise agility and making sure everybody's kind of talking the same language here. But I do see it, through the lens of executive leaders, right, to be one of this question around, like I said here, are we working on the right things and can we change
Exactly.
direction when we need to, right? And so I think there's the first work to be done, right, is making sure we're talking the same thing. Because
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
an agile purist or a project manager will often equate enterprise agility to agile transformations. But again, from my experience and vantage point, that's not the conversation that the C-suite's having when they talk about enterprise agility. So there's some work first to be done on aligning the what is the problem to solve. And then kind of bringing the organization forward in terms of the mindset, the capabilities and the adaptability on the things that they're working on, right, to be more adaptive, right, in the face of all of this chaos, right, this VUCA world that we're living in that's frankly only accelerating.
Hmm. Um, the enterprise agility, there is something interesting in it. It favors shared enterprise outcome over functional organization. So, valuable outcome for the entire enterprise over functional optimization. So, how can companies stop departments? Sorry. Uh, uh, if I may skip this, probably I go to another part. The manifesto says organizations should govern with clear guard rails, not gatekeepers. What do you think that looks like in real governance models?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. Look, so I think for me, it's about decision rights. And a lot of organizations say they want agility, but they centralize way too many decisions at the top. And everything funnels up into a steering committee. And that's where we create bottlenecks. So for me, guardrails, not gatekeepers, means first off, be very clear around who owns which decisions. And then second, and this is really critical and difficult, but push as many decisions as possible closer to where the work is happening, closer to where the value is being created. And that is, first and foremost, enabling executive leaders to let go of some control, right, and trust the front line, right. So it doesn't mean no governments, it just means better governance. And so that's where clear roles, clear escalation pathways, and fewer decisions that actually need to go to the top. And I think one of the big unlocks, when you think of these two dimensions, is the importance of an executive sponsor. When you have strong sponsorship that's aligned and engaged, and those elements here of engagement are super critical, because a lot of, I think, executive sponsors like to tote how many projects they're sponsoring, but a level of engagement and involvement with the project team and the project that they're sponsoring is critical. But you don't need this heavy governance layer, because I think the system runs a lot smoother when decisions don't get stuck trying to go up the pyramid here in order to advance a project. So the goal isn't to remove control; it's just designing controls intelligently. And it's also where kind of purpose is a really important enabler to give the folks, right, that are doing the work clear understanding of why we're doing this, and so that they can confront the challenges that they're going to face in delivering that, and have the authority and the capability to adapt to deliver that purpose, as opposed to blindly executing a scope and a budget and timeline here, right, that at some point may evolve away from delivering its original intent.
Based on your experience, Kevin, after the manifesto for enterprise agility was released, and I know you talked to a lot of C-suite people, C-level people. How much do you think these values from the manifesto and these principles will get, how much they can get buy-in from the executives, from the companies, decision makers? That's one question. And second question is, what does it take to spread this manifesto or the ideas in the manifesto? Is it it could spread through training, through tools, through workshops, or through conferences? Yeah, so if you can may answer these two questions, please.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Look, I think it's very sensible, right? Anybody that reads this says this makes sense. And for me, it's very obvious that this is the right way to look at this. And I think most C-suite executive leaders would agree with the premise of what it's promoting. I think the challenge is, frankly, power in politics. At the end of the day, when you're operating at that level of an organization, you got there because you're a strong A-type personalities, with a lot of experience. And with that, there's kind of naturally often a power struggle that happens, and the desire for these high-level leaders to really put their stamp on the business, and frankly to have discretion around the priorities that they set that are within their purview. And the problem is that I think propagates the functional siloing that tends to create these pet projects and zombie projects that are kind of lurking in the shadows of the shadow organization that really shouldn't be projects in the first place, right? And that's where for me, a lot of times when I talk about enterprise agility, it is about integrated project portfolio management, where we're able to look at all of the projects that we're trying to execute, and also holistically looking at what are the resources needed to execute this and where are they currently tied up, so that you can see I've got this competency in engineering and marketing and quality, right, that I need to deliver this innovation project, but they're tied up doing this business as usual, continuous improvement projects. We need to make a choice here of abandoning this project in order to prioritize this one. And that's where, breaking these functional silos from the top all the way through, the entire hierarchy that I think most organizations are still saddled with, frankly, is the problem to solve. But you do need, again, to get the executive team buy-off to break these silos. But I think when you, again, look at the Enterprise Manifesto or Enterprise Agility Manifesto, it's a very sensible, kind of approach here. But somehow we got to still confront these inherent challenges.
But you said when the executives in a company take decision to keep this project, get rid of this one is not going to bring value, this one is prioritize this project over these ones. I mean, they will not just decide, based on the the gut feeling. They will need tools for that, probably. So they gotta use something.
Yeah, and again, I think it's clear selection criteria, and again, purpose alignment here, right? Being able to look very objectively at all of the projects and which ones are worth the squeeze and which ones, are going to ensure that we're delivering on our North Star, because again, some of these other pet projects and zombie projects are just distracting our focus away from those critical priorities. So I do think it gets down to, looking at the projects, their justifications, recognizing that all projects aren't the same, innovation and digital transformations, are different, complexities and require different stakeholders. But again, just being able to look across all of the projects and be a little bit more data driven in what are the selection criteria that enables a go, no go. And there's still some creativity and judgment required in there, right? It can't be too scientific, but I do think, things like advanced or AHP, right, to help, prioritize initiatives against company objectives is some of the tools, that you need to bring forward. But again, in the project management speak here, for me, that's project portfolio management or enterprise stage gate or phase gate. These types of methodologies, I think, are some of the tools, right, that help bring, clarity and focus around the critical decisions that need to be made in delivering an organization's purpose.
So this sense of flexibility and agility definitely will impact the way corporations and companies fund the projects, definitely. The manifesto says funding should follow purpose and intent. And it definitely makes sense, and it links exactly to what you said earlier about we prioritize this project of this one because this one is going to give higher value, so it's going to get proper funding. We secure the funding for this project, etc. funding should follow purpose and intent, not execution activity. So, how, in your opinion, organizations move from annual budget rigidity, okay, to more adaptive investment decisions to be sure that their money went to the right place?
Yeah, look, this is such a huge component here of enabling this enterprise agility. And a lot of companies, and most companies, are still stuck in this legacy annual planning model. And they fund projects, right? Like they already know the answer. But the reality is, in most strategic initiatives, you start with a bunch of assumptions, right? When the executive team does their strategy offsite and they start, ideating, okay, where should we go and what should we do? You come out of that with a list of opportunities or initiatives that are, kind of stacked on a bunch of assumptions. And that's certainly undeniable when we talk about innovation, where you're kind of pushing into this frontier of unknown here. And that's why actually StageGate, was really invented, is recognizing that you need to kind of go through a learning process, right, to kind of convert these assumptions into fact, through some testing, due diligence, or prototyping, MVP kind of stuff here, right? So I do like to look at innovation, operating models, and innovation process, and apply that in the context of transformation, because I would say an M&A initiative or pursuit is very similar, right? It's like, okay, we need to undertake M&A to deliver on our business model and bring the capabilities that we need in order to achieve, whatever growth objective. And when you say, okay, this is the approach that we need to take, you're making a lot of broad assumptions, right? What type of company should we go acquire? What's out there that's available that we should, consider acquiring, right? And so there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of learning and due diligence that's required to get to the point of saying, oh, we need to go buy this company to bring in these capabilities and integrate them and complement our existing capabilities to unlock this potential. So it's very much like StageGate, or like innovation, and this idea of, funding everything up front just doesn't work in that context. You need this idea of agile funding or metered funding. And what I mean by that is you just got to fund these ideas in stages, the funding to learn, right, and gain some confidence behind some of the assumptions that you're making in the pursuit of an opportunity, and increase your confidence level before increasing your investment as that uncertainty gets reduced. This is the idea of, progressive commitment. And not every project you start should finish. And that's a good thing. Because the goal here isn't to complete project, is to make sure you're allocated your limited resources, human capital and financial capital, to the best opportunities over time. And for me, this agile funding, breaking this annual cycle, is a key enabler to avoid these zombie projects that just consume resources long after they should have been stopped here. And so, that's a big paradigm shift as well here to unlock enterprise.
So, did I hear it right? Prioritizing resource optimization to be able to deliver the intended value over prioritizing project completion. Did I get it right?
Yes. Well, again, it's just recognizing that when you make your initial decision of pursuing a particular project or initiative, right, there's a lot of uncertainty in most cases, at that juncture, right? And you don't need to commit to 100% of, that investment at this initial, decision gate. Actually, I recently published a LinkedIn article around decision clarity here in the face of the world that we live in. And actually, to quote my father here, who's working on the book, is the idea of, for complex matters, take 2 bites of the apple, right? And so, for me, this is, part of what rationalizes this idea of, look, I'm going to fund the mobilization of internal resources and some outside resources to go do some prototyping and some consumer testing and whatnot, or some due diligence around some M&A activity before I say, yep, this still makes sense, right? After I've done that work to increase the confidence, before I say fund the rest of it. And so again, you have to be judicious and recognize that, there's a progressive journey, and frankly, a funding commitment that really enables speed and agility, doesn't stifle it here. That allows you to be very intentional around, when funding gets released here after you've confirmed assumptions and uncertainties, and you're managing those tight constraint resources, capital and human capital through that process.
I still have a few more questions, but for example, when people go check your profile, Kevin, they see that you help CPG companies with innovation, R&D, engineering strategy. Um, so when we say R&D, innovation, etc., one of the first words that come to our minds is agility. Definitely, whether it's gonna be on project level or now on enterprise level. Okay, and you are a consultant yourself. You're an entrepreneur, but also you do consulting, a lot of consulting. Okay, um, how would you convince, or how would you spread, actually, now, how would you spread this enterprise agility among your clients, among people you meet, decision makers, and how can you help them adopt this mindset, including those values, those principles, in order to achieve, let's say, better results on a portfolio level, on a strategic level, not on a project level only?
That's a meaty question there for sure. But look, I do think, there's an element of innovation culture and risk tolerance that you need, right? People to, to bring forward, right? Or a mindset that you want to really foster. And the idea of, growth mindset instead of fixed mindset, right? These are, I think, all enabling, cultural, or business values, right? That I think bring about some enterprise agility. But I think, the other thing, from my experience, right, I've led product innovation programs, like, again, bringing new products to the market, right? And what happens is, again, that's the traditional innovation that a lot of people think about. It's, product or service innovation, and that's usually led by marketing and R&D, right? And so that's why, again, marketing often leads the innovation portfolio or R&D. But the reality in today's world, right, is that when you consider the broader business model, of a company, and you start thinking of technologies like AI is, leading innovation across the entire business model. And you can use, different frameworks for business model. Like, for example, the Strategizer has the business model canvas. Actually, Kai-Han Krippendorf from Outthinker Network has a really good framework for business model mapping here. But I think, the reality is, when you look at the business model, like things with how do we make our product? How do we sell our product? How do we promote our product? AI, as an example, is leading to innovation on all of those dimensions of innovation. And at that point, innovation is no longer just marketing and R&D's job, it's everybody's job. And so I think that's another, key element here of, bringing this innovation culture across the entire business, but also kind of recognizing that innovation is no longer something that a innovation hub or kind of a skunkworks program or necessarily a corporate venture capital, model should, exclusively focus on. It's really everybody's job, as opposed to, what I sometimes call a side gig for a lot of companies here. And so you need to embed innovation and enterprise agility, across all functions, across all the business, recognizing that, innovation should be democratized across, all departments, all functions, and bring value across the entire business model and create competitive advantage by innovating across, these various dimensions of the business model, well beyond just the product and service itself.
Is it safe to say that innovation or technological innovation, or utilization of the latest technological trends like AI, for example, is it safe to say that integrating technology has to go hand in hand with enterprise agility? Otherwise, if an enterprise is not agile enough, but still they want to adopt the latest technological advancements, maybe that will not work 100% as they wish, because they're not they're not agile enough, let's say, on enterprise level.
Well, look, if I understand your question correctly, I think there's a component of most project and innovation that leads with technology, right? But and in that regard, I guess what you could say, right, is digital transformation is in my view also innovation led from kind of the technology side of the business. But frankly, I like to think of technology based innovation as being a component of most projects, right? So at some point, right, we're going to bring a new ERP online, and we're doing so in order to, kind of unlock the potential of AI and all the associated kind of benefits there. But at some point, I may also bring technology in terms of, the digital experience of buying my product, say on an e-commerce environment, right? Like, so at some point, I think technology is a component of a lot of projects, and it should be an enabler, right, to achieve the organization's purpose, but it shouldn't be necessarily the starting point. So in other words, you need to figure out what are you trying to do and how does technology enable you to do it and maximize the impact or the value that you're generating out of your pursuits, when you think of strategy and business transformation. Not sure if that really answered your question, but kind of
Yeah,
how I think about innovation.
fine. It's fine. There is one principle in the Enterprise Agility Manifesto that says authority decision making should move closer to where value is created. Okay. Um, what do you think are the decisions that the teams should own, and what do you think are the decisions that remain with the senior leadership?
Yeah, look, like I said before, I think the one key principle is critical and simple here, but it's try to push as many decisions as close to where the value creation is happening, right? Where the work is being done, and as close to your customer or consumer as possible, right? But don't confuse that with removing leadership. I think actually, I believe it's Amazon and Andy Jassy that talks about two-way doors and one-way doors, and so the idea is that for me, frontline should own execution decisions, day-to-day trade-offs. How do we deliver against the objective or the purpose? And senior leadership should own portfolio prioritization decisions, strategic choices like, what is our purpose? And obviously, some of the associated capital allocation. The challenge is, again, when leadership holds on to too many operational decisions, everything slows down. But when teams have, clear purpose and the capabilities to avoid escalating, some of those decisions unnecessarily, then we really start, bringing speed and agility to the work that needs to get done to, realize the objective or the purpose of that particular pursuit. So again, the real work for me is about building trust in the front lines, building the capability. Well, and that's from the senior executive leadership side of things, right? Let go of some control, trust your front line, equip them with the right capabilities, and be very explicit about who decides what. And again, purpose is the anchor here. If teams understand the why, they can make better decisions without needing permission every time. And just the last, supporting point here is I really love the work that Rita McGrath is doing and reflected in one of her HBR articles. This idea of the permissionless organization, to me, that just resonates here, right? How do you foster and kind of create this environment where you don't need to go ask for permission, just go do it because you know that that's what's right, for the business, given the purpose of what that project's trying to achieve and the overall enterprise purpose. So I love this idea of the permissionless organization.
Right. But tell me, Kevin, when you were part of the, let's say, the early preparation phase and the research phase, were you guys focusing when you were talking about how an enterprise should be agile? Were you focusing on portfolios, programs, projects level, like project management part, or operational, or both, actually? See how an enterprise can be agile actually in both types of work, whether it's operation related work or project related work.
Yeah, look, I think there's a challenge in many large organizations, right? And Nestle is a good example of this, where you have a big brand and a lot of equity at stake, right? When something goes wrong in a particular market, right? The brand is a lightning rod, right? Globally, right? And so that just kind of fosters this risk aversion inherently. And look, most large organizations are facing this. I think the other reality is when you get to a certain scale of operations with business units across the globe and, a really diversified product portfolio and a lot of, associated fixed assets and infrastructure to deliver your product to the market, it's just so big and complex inherently. And the challenge, again, that, take your pick, Unilever, PepsiCo, Coke, all of these big CPGs are facing, like many other complex organization, is it's hard to prioritize across all of these units and functions and so on, right? So I think, like most companies, we struggle with the same things. And maybe a good example here is, I had an innovation stage gate process that was supported by a project portfolio management or SPM solution. And then I had a, manufacturing operations kind of CapEx approval process that was basically another stage gate, right, supported by another application solution. And then, as we undertake a transformation and we bring some horsepower with the big consultancies in-house, now we start adopting a transformation operating model, right? That's basically another stage gate, supported by, their transformation portfolio management solution. So what happens when you have an innovation project that requires CapEx during a transformation? Well, now I'm running that same projects through 3 approval workflows, and I've got the same executive leaders that need to go approve the same project in multiple places. And then you start kind of recognizing, like, this is, not efficient. There's a lot of waste here, and it's inherently, again, due to this size and complexity of the organization. But I think figuring out how to confront this and integrate, the choices that need to be made when it comes down to, are we doing this project or not, and do we have the resources to support it when we make that choice, is the big problem to solve here. So that's, I think, one of my passion projects these days here is helping companies, navigate those complexities and bring more speed, focus, and agility to, how they deliver on their North Star through innovation, transformation, and strategy execution.
Right. So if a company or an organization would like to apply this manifesto tomorrow, okay, what do you think should be the first 3 practical moves? Let's say in the next 30 to 60, 3 to 6 months, that this organization should take in order to apply what's in the manifesto itself.
That's a really good question. Look, I would probably boil this down to 3 things. The first thing is ruthless prioritization. Take your current portfolio and cut it aggressively. Some would challenge, like, cut half of your projects, right? Or start with 0 and say, what are the things that I need to put back into the bucket here? Because most organizations are really trying to do way too much and exceeding their capacity to execute. So you don't get agility by adding more, you get it by focusing and prioritizing, and that's very difficult. And a lot of companies, frankly, suck at saying no to projects that are distracting away from their key priorities. I think related to that here, but and a second thing that I'd really prioritize is look to define purpose at the project level, right? For every major initiative, answer one question very clearly: why are we doing this? And then keep asking why, right? If you've ever used the 5 whys approach, right? Just keep drilling on why, but why, and get to the higher level purpose. So everybody's clear. This makes sense. That the why is compelling, and we should keep this in the mix, right? So, because if you can't answer that in a compelling way, it shouldn't be in your portfolio. And then the other piece is, I think, establishing this dynamic operating rhythm. We talked about the financial allocation process, right? This agile and metered funding. Look, CapEx projects from a lot of my past experience, I think it does this pretty well in the sense of, look, I'm going to set aside X percentage of my revenue as my CapEx envelope, and I'm going to, set that aside for the year, and I'm going to release that, allowance, right, to the projects when they're ready, and progressively as they need to do some preliminary work to increase the confidence to say, it makes sense to go secure that contract with the ERP supplier, or to buy the land to go build a factory, or cut loose, the orders of the equipment after you've figured out, where am I going to drop this thing? Which of our factories should I install this new line, or which acquisition should I really pursue? So for me, the financial piece of it, but just the dynamic, portfolio reviews, right? Going from like annual down to quarterly is a big step forward. But I'd argue even monthly portfolio reviews is what you need to create here in terms of a dynamic operating rhythm. And regularly reprioritize. This clear keep, kill it, or pivot decisions here, and what informs those decisions is something that organizations need to be focused on defining. And again, an innovation project isn't an IT project exactly, but at some point, making sure in the context of that project type that you have some clear decision guardrails around, how do you decide what to keep, kill, or pivot here is critical. So agility, like transformation, isn't a one-time event. It's a rhythm, an operating rhythm, or I like to call this an enterprise agility operating system. And I think once that rhythm's in place, then everything starts to fall into place, and enabling, these executives to be able to say, yes, we're working on the right things because we've got this dynamic operating rhythm that helps us revalidate this on almost a continuous basis as we bring these ideas to market.
I will tell you about this company I worked for 12 months, 12 years ago, 12 years ago. And I will tell you how they decided on the different initiatives that were proposed to them by department leads or business development managers or heads of divisions. And tell me if you had that enterprise agility in your hands at that time, and if you were working for them, how would you advise them to do things differently? Okay, so I joined this company, and every 2 weeks they had this what they call a change approval board. So all the executives were sitting, and then anyone in the company, usually those were business development managers, BDMs, sales managers, they were coming to this meeting with their different ideas, different initiatives. Create a product and launch it in this country, create a solution and launch it in this region, probably work on an M&A with this local company in this country, etc. And I was just sitting there and watching, because my manager wanted me to sit there and watch, because then the initiatives which were approved, or the ideas which were approved, then we took them to project management to work on them as projects. So how were they deciding? The C-suite were sitting, listening to the BDM, business development manager, or anyone who listened to their idea. They were doing some presentation on some probably predefined template. And then with the gut feeling that someone would say, I think this would work. I like it. Yes, let's do it. The other one would say, this BDM had such a great idea last year. It worked. I think this idea will work too. That's how they were deciding. Does that really go with the agility mindset?
No, look, I think there's a point. Look, and I think innovation is a great, example to leverage here, right? Because at some point, and actually, I love, Roger Martin at some point, would challenge you to kind of recognize that data is 100% informed based on the past. And when you're doing something like innovation, right, where the future is quite different than the past, how do you leverage historical data to steer your direction for innovation, right? So at some point, there's a practical limitation, right, in terms of data-driven decisions, especially when you're confronting this uncertain world. And so there's a level of judgment required in making these decisions, and recognizing, okay, the data is getting me to, some basis of insight, but at some point, somebody needs to make a gut call. And so it's a very difficult thing to define very clearly. I think there's an opportunity to be more data driven, but there's also a point where going to get this increased confidence through more data collection is the thing that slows down a lot of organizations, because we're not willing to make a decision on 70% confidence level because we want to get to 90%. And so we spend an inordinate amount of resources collecting more data, forecasting, what is this opportunity going to really materialize? And frankly, then we miss the boat here on the market opportunity that we're ultimately trying to unlock here. So it's not an easy question to answer and an exact science here, but I think it's an important balance to strike of data-driven decisions, informing ultimately what ends up being a judgment call at some point.
Yeah, actually, 3 months watching that happening in that company. After 3 months, my manager came to me and told me, you know what, Ahmed, I'm sick of the senior management taking the wrong decisions, because almost half of those initiatives were not, let's say, beneficial, for the company at all. So they created what we call a decision matrix, an
Yeah.
automated one where with no human intervention at all. They set the parameters, the criterias, the weight of each criteria. Then all of the researches done by the business development managers were translated into numbers, put into that decision matrix, and the decision matrix will give a go or no go automatically, and that really lowered the number of initiatives which failed. We had
Yeah.
at the beginning failure rate of 50%, then it went down to almost 24% after,
Yeah.
I think, a year.
Well, look, again, like I said before, there's definitely an opportunity to trim the portfolio here quite significantly, and I think you can do that by setting these guardrails
Yeah.
that define, okay, what are the kind of the minimums that we need to achieve before we really seriously consider whether the pursuit or not. And actually, to shout out some of my friends at Transparent Choice, I think they've done a pretty good job with their SPM solution of leveraging AHP to bring a little bit more science and data to decision making. And I do think there's a way to be smarter with qualifying these opportunities to support these decisions. But again, there's a point where you get to practical reality of, okay, we could keep chasing this rabbit here, but we need to make a call, otherwise we're going to lose our opportunity. And so again, knowing when you reach that point here, and again, understanding the limitations of the data, again, is a critical balance. And it's not the same for every company, because also, this other piece of risk tolerance, right? Everybody's got a different risk profile. And this was, for me, one of the fulfilling experience of going from large, public company corporate to the private equity world is, a drastic risk tolerance shift. And when you're pursuing innovation and you're creating this new frontier, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of risk, and you got to have the grit to be able to navigate that confidently, knowing that you're not going to be certain about anything. But you need to balance, data and judgment. And again, I think bringing some of that towards these more risk-averse environments is also important. But again, not shedding entirely clear governance and data-enabled decisions.
We still have just a few more minutes, and before asking, I would like to ask the audience, in case they have any questions, to put them in the chat, and we can take them on screen. Maybe I have one last question, almost, Kevin. Since we saw an update to the most famous certifications in the world, whether it's PMP, whether it's Prince2, whether it's ITIL, ITIL, or any other certification, they all integrated agility, let's say on the project level, as you called it earlier, okay, into their curriculum now. Most certifications adapted to that. Do you think at one point we could see programs like, for example, an MBA program, for example, okay, where enterprise agility taken from that manifesto is actually a topic being taught, at an MBA level or an EMBA level or a DBA level or any other program level? Because why did I mention MBA? Because PMP is more for projects. MBA is more on an enterprise level. Generally, okay, it's probably broader and bigger, larger than a project. Do you think at some point when this enterprise agility manifesto gets more famous, more white papers, are released about that topic, how it can be applied in different industries, do you think we could see it as part of, education curriculums like an MBA and similar other programs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody should be focused on bringing more speed and agility to the work that they do, and I think that's very much true for the project practitioner community, as I think it also belongs in higher education programs, right? As you're looking to equip folks to operate effectively and navigate this new business world that we live in, right? So. I think that, so I do see some merit in bringing some, structure and formalizing, some training and education around the subject. We definitely need to align ourselves on what are we really talking about with enterprise agility, because again, I think PMI and agile, kind of practitioners tend to be a bit stuck in an echo chamber at times. And so I think bridging, the divide between the practitioners and the business leaders, senior leaders of organization, I think is critically important. But I think at the end of the day, we got to find a way to make this stuff simpler here, because I think a lot of times, we make stuff much more complicated than it really needs to be. And I take a tendency towards a very pragmatic view of this kind of stuff. And so I do like simple, stupid. And I think the Enterprise Agility Manifesto is a really great starting point, because it really kind of distills this conversation down to, I think, the things that are very sensible, that are understandable across both the practitioners and the business leaders. And again, I think we need to continue that conversation and bring more alignment towards unlocking this potential here of business resilience and agility in this environment that we're just going to be operating in. This pace of change is not going away. It's here to stay. We just got to get wired around how to work and operate in this environment.
Probably there are not many questions from the audience. So, Kevin, what are your future plans? In your career now that you're so much involved with helping different organizations do their transformations. How do you see your future plans, your future work? As part of the agility and outside of the agility as well.
Yeah, look, I think I'm a curious person. I love innovation. I love to learn. I'm a career learner. And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this career transition is the ability to curate the things that I'm working on, and also to, pursue areas of interest, in terms of my own learning and development, right? So this topic in particular is definitely the passion project. And I could talk about this subject for hours on end, but I also love innovation. And at the end of the day, I have deep expertise in the beverage sector. And in fact, this week here, I'm at BevTech. It's a big beverage technology conference. And I struggle to stay away from, my engineering background and, getting into the, engineering design workflow and digital manufacturing, industry 4.0, as well as the kind of product and packaging innovation. So look, despite me promoting to organizations that they need to focus in order to, deliver goals, I often struggle with it myself, because I'm just a naturally curious person and love exploring, this spectrum of engineering, innovation, strategy, and transformation execution here. So, but again, I think, the ability to do this as an entrepreneur and curate the things that I'm working on, right, is a great way to, really focus the work that I'm doing on the things that I'm really passionate about. And ultimately, I see work-life balance through the lens of, wanting to ensure I love what I'm doing for work, where it doesn't feel like work, right, as opposed to working, to go enjoy myself on my time off. So frankly, my nightstand is stacked with books on these topics. But yeah, I think for me, fulfillment is enjoying what you're doing, both in your work and personal life together.
Right. And you're also trying to be active on LinkedIn. I see you keep, you're posting stuff every now and then, right?
Yeah, definitely. If anybody wants to connect here, love connecting on LinkedIn and meeting new folks, networking, exchanging ideas, trading notes here as I, confront this entrepreneurship and venture, if you will, but also kind of supporting clients here in solving the problems that they're tackling, where, my experience lends itself well to that. So yeah, definitely.
Did you ever get clients? Did you ever get clients from LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, again, definitely connecting to folks, that lead to opportunities really and augmenting, my professional brand, if you will, through a platform like LinkedIn is a really good environment. So I think for me, it's a really good place to connect with folks that are in a similar place in me, that are looking to collaborate on similar things, right? And potentially partner on engagements, but also identifying and connecting with clients here that are confronting the challenges that I'm looking to solve as well.
Before I let you go, Kevin, and the time's up almost, have you considered taking the PFMP, the Portfolio Management Professional certification from PMI?
Yes, although I'm going to leave you with a bit of a provocative suggestion here. I struggle with why we have a PGMP and PFMP. Um, as two separate certification bodies work, because for me the work is basically the same, but I do think project portfolio management, right, is where strategy operations really happens, and so I do see a lot of merit and credibility there. But again, I think in the body of knowledge and the certifications, I also see, frankly, an opportunity for these certifications to get streamlined, integrated, and simplified here. Because right now, frankly, you shouldn't need a PhD to run a project. Quite frankly, that may be the last provocative thing I'll leave you with. I am a big fan of Antonio Nieto's project management handbook, the Harvard Business Project Management Handbook. I call it the pragmatic PMBOK guide. And so for me, that's the really good distilled version. So check it out, and also his new book here. But again, I think again there's a lot of merit to the certification, the depth of insight and knowledge, and the great thought leadership from PMI. And so I continue staying connected with that community, contributing to the discussion, and frankly learning from all the great thought leadership that Lenka and Pierre are really supporting in their respective roles here. So appreciate the great work that's being done there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. I'll let you know, have the closing word in case you want to share anything with the audience.
No, I'm really grateful. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. This is, again, a topic really close to my heart. So happy to continue the conversation with anybody else that's interested, and hope it was helpful for folks that joined with us today.
It was really, people are thanking you. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time. I really appreciate that. And I really wish you success at the conference where you are right now, whatever you're doing.
Thank you. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you too.